Today, we have a PSA to hand out because of an announcement let out by Blizzard from a few hours ago regarding the banning of Mythic Plus leavers. So there has been this message spread across the community that now Blizzard is going to be punishing all of the players who leave Mythic Plus keys. And as expected, the response from much of the community has been completely misguided. If you were to read the comments and the responses from this announcement from Blizzard, you would be thinking that practically everyone who leaves a key before the key is completed, then he is eligible for being a potential griefer of that Mythic Plus run. You know, here is this guy, this completely clueless person saying we just had a +10 ruined because we wiped once and the healer left. That is the point of the misconception. The message from Blizzard is not at all about your keys being bricked because one player leaves after you wipe. That is not what is being referenced to here by Blizzard. Their message to the community is that they have been issuing, starting from today, suspensions to players who intentionally leave Mythic Plus groups a great many times in the War Within Season 1. They point out that this behavior was without regard for the experience of their fellow players and also even deliberately intending to harm others' experiences. This is in relation to practically what the word actually means, griefers. We're talking about players who enter a key and then immediately leave the dungeon. We are talking about players with a history of repeated offenses on practically leaving dungeons more often than not in an intentional manner. Whether or not the key was even going well or was going badly, it was just to practically grief the key. Join a group, enter the key, start the key, and then leave. That is what, for the most part, is being actioned here by Blizzard. And that's the problem that you have been seeing from the comments, regardless of where you went, whether it was Twitter, whether it was Wowhead, whether it was Reddit, or even better, the official forums for the game. Players being extreme, pointing out, so now I am forced to stay in 40 IQ groups with DPS doing tank damage, because otherwise if I leave, I will be considered a griefer, an intentional griefer, and be banned. No, that is still not what these bans are going to be targeting, and it is confusing many players. For example, someone is rightfully asking, so how do they differentiate someone griefing intentionally and the first pull of something like Stonevolt or Necrotic Wake, so some of the bigger ones, the ones more at risk of going badly, and then seeing it's not just a timeable key. So you just, pull, tank dies, it's a full wipe, players leave. That is not what Blizzard is referencing in this wave of bans. People leaving due to a key going wrong or going badly or potentially becoming a waste of time is not going to be part of the clump of players that Blizzard is punishing today. Of course, maybe it might be just you. Maybe if you try to say, well, in my experience, 99% of my keys always went wrong, therefore I always left a key midway through because it was always going to be a wasted key, then maybe you're the problem. But for the vast majority of the player base, this is not what it references to. You will for sure have seen plenty of those comments that read this message from Blizzard and assume that the pesky guy who left the key that you still thought was timeable is going to be punished, or the pesky couple of guys who left the key after the first wipe in a key are going to be the ones being punished. Or maybe even the classic tank makes a mistake, tank says that it's the healer's fault, the healer says no, it's your fault, so the tank just leaves. That is also not what is going to be actionable in this message from Blizzard. They have specifically pointed out that this is something that has been done by the same person a great many times throughout Season 1 of this expansion, and also, more often than not, to deliberately intending to harm others' experiences, and less so because the key went wrong or because they wanted to save time on trying to complete an already depleted key. So I thought it was a worthwhile PSA just in case players, from tomorrow they enter a Mythic Plus 11, in the first 3 pulls they have 7 deaths and someone leaves and wonder why that player hasn't been banned yet. That is because that player is not that kind of player that will be banned following these points from Blizzard. They will have, of course, some data points to check which kind of players do this. For example, they can see how many times a player left a key, depending on the status use of the key. So for example, if you see that in 20 Mythic Plus keys, the player has left 19 keys out of 20, and in those 19 keys, the amount of deaths before the player left were 0 to 1 or 0 to 2 amount of deaths, then probably it means if you left for 19 times in a row with barely any deaths, you might be doing it intentionally. At the same time, they can also see, for example, if you left a key after 5, 10 or 15 deaths. If you left a key after only 5 deaths, but in the first 30 seconds of a dungeon. Those are things that they can see, and those are things, at least from personal experience, which I believe will be for most players, it's practically 95, we can say, maybe even 97% of your experiences with players leaving. You have seen players leave either because the first pull goes wrong, or because you are 5, 10, 15 or even 20 minutes through the dungeon and it starts to become more and more clear that the key will not be timed. You know, you're already strapped for time, you're already unsure if you're going to time it, and then the tank dies on this pull and you have 3 DPS dying and you have to restart and you're like, okay, well, that's over. You're not gonna time this, and someone leaves. These kind of situations are not where players are going to be punished. And of course, this could be a community discussion. You know, some players are actually okay with this and others are not. For example, someone is trying to say, yeah, some of you here are really outing yourselves as the type to insta-leave when one thing goes wrong in a key. And then you have the other type of player that says, yeah, sorry, I will insta-leave a +12 with a wipe on the first boss with Bloodlust being used. You know, you can't recover that key is over, I'm not wasting my time. So you can argue whether or not that's the kind of player you want to be in a Mythic Plus key. However, you cannot argue that that will be a bannable offense, no matter which kind of extreme you try to make an example out of. For example, sorry, I'm not gonna stay in your 40 deaths key that has no hope of being timed. And this person, unironically huffing copium since birth, is trying to tell this other guy that these bans from Blizzard are made for you, and I'm glad you're getting beeped in the beep by Blizzard. Clearly, those are not the kind of players that will be punished by Blizzard with these bans. Repeated griefers of keys who have done this a great many times in this season are not the kind of players who leave a key when they believe the key is over. That is not be what will be punished by Blizzard, or what has started to be punished by Blizzard from today with these waves of bans. These are mostly related to griefers, players with some kind of mental problems or some kind of weird fetishes on just ruining people's days and ruining people's times by joining a key and just leaving it almost immediately, or doing the even more incomprehensible prank of staying in the key until the last boss and then leaving on the last boss. You know, this is a relevant PSA to have just in case players get the wrong idea, you know, just in case they think that just because they read this announcement from Blizzard, then from today, leavers in Mythic Plus have now been purged. You know, from today, leaving any Mythic Plus key is going to put you at risk of being banned, because you have just signed a legally binding contract as soon as you started the key, which forces you to stay in the key until its completion. That is not what is going to be happening with these types of punishments from Blizzard. 99% of the kind of players who leave keys in Mythic Plus are going to be completely unaffected by this kind of punishment. It's true, there might be layers depending on the difficulty. For example, players who start going above +13 or +14 key levels right now deplete some 80, maybe even 90% of all the keys they do. So practically, someone who is trying to push into +15 is going to be leaving 9 keys out of 10. You're going to go into, say, a Green Battle, go towards the third boss in the corridor with very nasty trash mobs, die, 3 times in that corridor, and someone calls it quits. And 9 times out of 10, those keys will be depleted. Those kind of players are obviously not going to be punished by Blizzard for leaving 90% of their keys. Obviously, it might be a little bit different on the lower end. If you're trying to farm some lower keys on your alt and you're doing a +6, technically, you are free to time a +6 even after dying 30 times. So if you start seeing a player who has been repeatedly leaving 90+ +% of their keys at +6 level because a bunch of players, clearly, you know, unskilled or new, keep dying. So he feels like he can just continuously leave these kind of low-level keys, even if they are still easily timeable. Then that might be a possible kind of punishment that still counts for those type of players. But in general, this is still not what most players, based on the initial responses of this announcement from Blizzard, that's not the kind of player that is being punished in this announcement from Blizzard. The, you know, generic pug leaver who leaves a key because you have 7 deaths and you are likely going to be 4 minutes out of time is not who is going to be at the center of this announcement from Blizzard. So it was worth to have this PSA just in case players get the wrong idea. Just in case players get the wrong idea that from tomorrow Mythic Plus will be a safe haven, people leaving will go extinct, and everyone will stay in any keys, even all the ones that will deplete. No, this won't change pretty much anything about the leaving rate of the players you usually see in your keys. So I thought this announcement was important enough that it was worth to point out what exactly it meant and who exactly is it going to target in reference to the actual griefers who leave multiple keys very often in Mythic Plus. So this was the recap of the announcement of Blizzard related to the punishments they are handing out for Mythic Plus leavers on this Wednesday. So with this out of the way, we can now leave each other at the beginning of this yet another reset of Season 1 of The War Within. So with this out of the way, we can now leave each other on this Wednesday. Thanks, of course, as usual, for having watched the video, together with, of course, supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, it will be pretty funny though. It will be pretty funny though if you were banned from ever leaving a Mythic Plus key and you had to go through like 50+ minute runs that were completely doomed since minute 1. That would feel pretty depressing.